Oh, one person. Amazing. This is going to be perfect. Great. So this is me back in the pandemic. You remember that time when we were all stuck at home, couldn't leave the house, couldn't do anything. Sat at home, had nothing to do, pretty bored. Is this much better? Here we go. I can hear myself now. So that's me, sat at home during the pandemic, very lonely and miserable on my own in the flat. No one to talk to, very bored, thinking to myself, what am I going to do with my time, seeing as I've got nothing to do? So I decided to make an app. I decided to make a brand new social network from scratch. No one's ever done it before. Change the world, going to be the new Mark Zuckerberg. It's going to be incredible. And that app was an app called Rally. It's an app for LGBTQIA+ sports and fitness. And the idea is you can go in, you can, oh, this microphone is stressing me out. You can go in, you can have a look at different teams that are playing in your local area. You can find events that are going on. You can meet people. You can suggest things. You can chat to people, make new friends. It's pretty good. This is me, by the way, Dunks. It's pretty good. I think it's going to be amazing. Doesn't exist, so I decided to make it. I got down. I started working from scratch, everything. And it's worth saying that when you make a social network from scratch, there's a hell of a lot to do. You're not just coding. You've got to do all sorts of stuff. You've got to do UX, you've got to do graphic design, you've got to do market research, you're testing loads of stuff, you're recruiting people, you're recruiting teams, you're doing press packs, there's loads of shit you need to do. Making websites, I've never made a website before I was doing that, it was a nightmare. So there was quite a lot to do. So when it comes to coding problems, the last thing you want to be doing is sitting around trying to fix a problem for days on end. You want to get things fixed nice and quick, get moving on and see if you can get this thing finished. And this is what brings me to the beloved GeoHash. Who here has done location queries in their programming before? Very nice. Location queries are funny because they kind of feel like they should be quite intuitively easy to do, but then actually they're kind of a nightmare. Fine if you're using a relational database, not so much if you're using Firebase. And I chose to use Firebase for my social network. So just to remind you, the app's about finding local teams, people, events, things like that, based on your location. You can see here the location set to London. So what we want to do is we want to show things that are going on near to London. So let's imagine a couple of people are in Barcelona. They've come to Barcelona to enjoy the beautiful Catalan cuisine. They've had their tours around the beautiful Gaudi architecture. They've had enough of the stunningly dirty beaches that we have in Barcelona. And now they're thinking, what more can we do here? I know, we can play some LGBTQIA+ sports. Perfect. So they go and download the app, and what are they going to see? So the whole point of our query is that we want to show them not everything that exists in the world. We want to show them stuff that's relevant to them. So maybe we can look at Barcelona. We can create a radius of about 10 kilometers around the city, and we want to just show stuff that happens in that area. Yeah, classic location search. So really, it kind of makes sense in code to just say, well, look, we know what the longitude and the latitude are. We can probably make an estimate on what the difference would be in order to create a region. How's the code going for the non-techies? All good? This is pretty simple. So we're just adding 0.1 or taking 0.1 away, and we're creating a small range. Kind of, it's a bit crude, probably doesn't really work around the poles too much. It's probably a bit messy. But what we're doing is we're just doing a greater than or less than on the latitude and a greater than less than on the longitude. Is this going to work? Absolutely not. Not going to work. And the reason it's not going to work is because Firebase uses a NoSQL database. That on a relational database, what you could do is you can chain up these greater than less than as much as you want. But on Firebase, you can't because it's NoSQL. You can only have really one index which works on this variable field. So it's back to the drawing board. What do we think Firebase would recommend to us? So Firebase recommends something called GeoFire, which honestly is kind of shitty, But anyway, it's, I'm gonna talk you through it. The idea with GeoFire is whenever you want to save a location, you tell it to store the location, and it creates this wonderful, incredibly readable little table here, which says what the IDs are that you've saved, and this horrible little G code against it. And then when you want to fetch around a radius, you can pass in the longitude and latitude, you can pass in the radius of 10 kilometers, and then what it will do is it will come back with just the IDs that match your query. It doesn't tell you how it's done, doesn't explain anything. You can't do anything more complicated than what's done there. And that's pretty much it. And this is okay, but it doesn't really do it for me. Number one, it's creating a new table with information in it, which I then have to maintain. But on top of that, I'm not just looking for a list of the IDs nearby. I actually want to look for, let's say in the case of events, I want to look for events which are within 10 kilometers of me, but also for match the sports that I like playing, but also that are events in the future. I don't care about the ones that are in the past. So we kind of want something a little bit more interesting, and I'm going to have to get in, I'm going to have to try and work it out myself. So I start to do some hacking. This is me. That's actual footage of me in lockdown in my flat. And this is where we get to the beloved geohash. This is a geohash, and it represents a code which tells you an exact point on the Earth's surface. So this is going to explain to you how geohashes work. Let's try zooming in and having a look at the Glovo office here in Barcelona. So the whole world is split into these buckets. And if you go into the S bucket, we can see Barcelona is in the SP bucket. We can then go to the SP3 bucket, which is this area. This is SP3E. Now, I think D, yeah, there we go. And we can keep zooming in, and each bucket is a little bit more closed in. And what you'll find is that to an infinite level, every point on the Earth's surface is covered by this code. We only really are interested in the first 8 characters, because after that, you're right down to a really small level that we don't need to care about. And this is actually based on a really interesting concept in maths, which is these space-filling curves. This is the Hilbert curve, which is a different curve to the one that this uses. But the idea is that each level of recursion down you go, you're actually looking at more detail and covering more points to the point that you're covering the infinite plane. Did I say that right, Marek? Marek's got a doctorate in maths, so he's like fact checking me as we speak, like he's giving me these evil looks. So let's go back to our query. What we want is we want to get all the events or the people or the teams or whatever that are around 10 kilometers of Barcelona. So here's our radius that we can see, and we can see that this is beautiful. It fits right in there in the SP3 bucket. So what I could do is I could write my query as simple as this: go and get me any users where the field geohash is equal to SP3. And you can see here it's going to return those 4 there. Ronan's there twice. That was a mistake. That should be your name. That's perfect, right? That's exactly what we want, right? Wrong. Let me introduce you to a good friend of mine, Queen Elizabeth II from England, which is where I'm from. I don't know if you could tell that. I don't know why she's looking so grumpy, because that maybe it's the weight of that hat. Maybe it's all like the crises she's having in her family. I don't know. Anyway, so she lives in this quite modest flat in central London called Buckingham Palace, and she's just downloaded the app. Apparently she's a huge fan of LGBTQIA+ sports. Who isn't? And so what we want to do is we want to return to her all the events and the teams and the people that are within this 10-kilometer radius of her flat in central London. But we've got a problem, because she's right on the border between 2 different buckets. If we give her the app now, with the way we've got the code at the moment, because she lives in GCPU bucket, she's only going to get half the events. Like, she's not going to be happy about that. She's really not going to be happy about that. What we actually want to do is we want to say, well, actually, once she's in 2 buckets, so let's go and get her the data from both buckets, and then she can get to see everything, right? That makes sense. So how can we work out how we're going to get these 2 buckets? So one thing we can do is we can ask the geohash libraries that exist, and we can say, hey, we're in GCPU. What are my neighboring like? What are my neighboring buckets? And when you look at this, that kind of makes sense, but then you've got here 7 buckets where they're not relevant at all. It's only actually those 2 that we're interested in. How can we go from GCPU to knowing that we need the data from just those 2 buckets and not all 9 of them? And so let's try this. Let's go in 1 level deeper down to GCPUU, which has now got Buckingham Palace. It's a much smaller area. And we can have a little look at the surrounding neighboring buckets. And if we notice, those top 3 are all GCPV, and the bottom 6 are GCPU. And if we actually deduplicate that list, what we get is the 2 that we're interested in. Yeah. And so now what we can do is we know that we need to fetch data from those 2 sections only and not all 9 of them. And we can write our query to do that. Queen's happy. Perfect, right? Wrong. I'd like to introduce you to the town of Poniatowski. I don't even know how to say it. Poniatowski in Wisconsin, USA. Poniatowski looks really cool. I know what you're thinking. It looks pretty cool. But there's something more important which makes it even cooler. Poniatowski sits in the middle of 4 of the biggest buckets that you can have that cover the entire world: C, F, 9, and D. This is our town. This is our 10-kilometer radius. Why don't we use our algorithm that we've worked out and let's see if we can make it work? Because we know that these are the 4 buckets we're interested in. So we want to make sure our algorithm comes to this same conclusion. So here we go. We've got our longitude and latitude. We've worked out our geohash, and we've worked out that we're in DPBBB. Easy for you to say. We're going to look at the neighboring buckets. We're then going to look at the parent buckets of those neighbors, and we're then going to deduplicate the list, and boom, we've got our 4 buckets. It's worked. This is perfect. And look at that. They're not even from that. That place is like flat. I don't even know where I got that picture from. Like I just found it on the internet. Perfect, right? Okay, well, almost. Here's the thing. In Poniatowski, 10 kilometers isn't really going to get you much data. I imagine there's loads of people in Athens and Edgar and Rib Falls, but I can't imagine they're uploading that much content. So what we might want to do is we might want to upscale these buckets, have a look at buckets which are on a higher level so that they cover a bit more ground. But the problem is that in our query, we use geohash, and it's always been 4 characters. But if we could do a starts with, it would work. But Firebase NoSQL doesn't really like that. It actually ends up using it like a relational database and says that's actually a greater than or a less than. So we're going to have to do something different. And the way we can fix this is simply by storing geohashes for the levels 2, 3, and 4 on our data tables. By doing that, when we come to do the query, if the user has said, I want a 100-kilometer radius, we know that we can use the geohash 3. If they want an even bigger one, we can use geohash 2, and a smaller one, geohash 4. Below 4, it's not really that useful. Maybe could be useful for something that needs a bit more location tracking, but for what we're doing, definitely not needed. And what all of this enables us to do, which we couldn't do before, is to write queries like this. Give me the events where the geohash looks like one of the neighboring buckets to this geohash, where the start date is greater than today, where the event has been published, where the sports that it's about are football or American football, where the organizer is not me and where it hasn't been deleted. This kind of complex querying isn't possible with GeoFire. It isn't possible in any other way with, well, it probably is in other ways, but certainly not in the way we could have done it. And so we're done. It all works. It's been working perfectly up until now. Maybe I'm going to hit a problem soon. You never know, but it seems to be going pretty well. Any questions? Anyone loves geohash as much as me? No? No takers? No. Great. You can download Rally. It's live. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Feel free to download the app. You don't even have to be LGBTQIA+. Anyone can use it. It's for all of our friends and allies. Marin, I'm going to hand over to you. A couple of words now. He's going to talk us about Glovo. And then after that, we're going to have a quick break.
I'm not that tall, so it's like, okay, let's see. Let me see, slides. Oh, why? Okay, let's see. It doesn't work. Okay, just 1 sec. It stops when I start. I don't know. I move to the slideshow and then I come. This one. Now it worked. Okay, great. So first of all, I got tricked to do this. Actually, David is the one that actually helped organize this, thank you, David, for this. I've been enjoying a lot the chat so far. I was actually going out on vacation because I got married 10 days ago. And the day before I was leaving, thanks. Thank you so much. That reconforts a lot after getting married. So the day before I was leaving, David was like, hey, so we need to give like 5-minute talk. Why don't you do it? It's like, okay, great. So I'm gonna stick a lot to what Glovo is. So for the ones that you might not know it, but I'll first introduce myself. So yeah, my name is Mauro. I'm staff engineer here at Glovo, mainly mobile, iOS heavy focus, but I'm trying to shift a bit more into the dark side, even though it's not something I really enjoy. Thanks. I assume that was well done, but okay. Okay, so first of all, I would like to know for the ones that live in any of the countries we operate in, how many of you have actually tried Glovo for food delivery? Okay, okay. I see some potential customers still. Grocery delivery? We will get more now that Gorillas is out. And then last one is anything outside food or groceries. Okay, well, pretty good representation, better than I thought. So actually, the reason I'm asking this is because maybe you don't know, but this is our company's vision, right? So our vision actually, this was the vision when I joined the company in 2017. So it's not something new. And our vision actually is to try and give you anything in your city. Of course, this is a very, vague concept. Then people start to throw, WeChat, these Chinese apps, they do all the things. Yes, we're not going to go there. But basically, this is in our DNA, right? So we're trying all the day to build this sort of solutions for our customers. So in terms of facts, what the PR team approved that I could say, and I mentioned this before. So we operate in 26 countries, over 1,300 cities, and we have more or less 130,000 monthly active partners. So these are small restaurants or stores or big chains that actually operate with us. So one of the things that I actually make, to me, Glovo unique, or very interesting at least, is that actually we have two very different types of markets we operate in. So we have very mature markets, like for example, Europe, Spain, Italy, etc., in which we focus, or our main concerns are the ones on the left, right? So building new categories, new verticals, new products for customers, growing a lot our catalog density. So we offer more and more restaurants and partners and retail for our users. Pricing, be competitive or pricing, even though now the market is shifting towards profitability. So that's kind of a hard mix. Then ads and brands. So monetizing, that's a big thing. So we need to start thinking about how we integrate brands and ads within our platform. But then if you look at new markets, and actually the one that we like the most and we focus the most on is Africa, is a completely different world, right? If you've ever been there, if you don't, go. I think it's a life-changing experience. They have really different purchase and usage habits. So one good data point that we got a few weeks ago on a conference internal chat was, I would say, middle-class African family spends 40% of their income in groceries and just around 2-3% on restaurants. So that means that our product, which is mainly food, is fucked up. Then, you know, of course, we have the typical tech constraints. So app size, something that we really need to focus on there. Network usage and conditions. There are countries that have 1 single or 2 public IPs for the entire country. That's not great. And then also integrations, right? So, you know, you all know Stripe, ADN, they're so nice, but then there they have mobile money, which is a nightmare, right? So we need to make sure that we can enable all of this. So actually, why I'm speaking all of this or telling all of this to you is actually this shapes a lot how we do mobile at Glovo, right? So one of the main things we're been focusing for a while, and we're focusing even more, is actually the flexibility of our app. We don't want to start having like some companies like the light version of the app shipped to the store. That's something we're preventing ourselves to do. So we're trying to move into making it more modularized, also trying to modernize a lot of our architecture and very backend driven heavy, which is something you probably heard too many times. And also on developer efficiency for the speed we can iterate, and because all these markets change super rapidly and change in a very different way. So we need to make sure we're agile to tackle all of those. And so we're reviewing our processes. We're, for example, on call, which is a very extensive topic, we're actually making sure that our on-call serves these various markets, which is not an easy challenge. And just to finish, so I finish with the blah, 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 and you can get the pizzas and the beers. Some small stats that got approved. So iOS actually represents 40% of our monthly active users. Android is 50 something, I believe, and web is tiny. But iOS represents 53% of our order creation volume. So with less sessions, we do more orders. Roldan, I don't see you, but oh, there? Okay, you take it. We've been featured 4 times, as far as I checked this morning, on the App Store, which is a nice data point to give. And then in terms of hand count, we've grown a lot. Actually, when I was in the last NSBarcelona presentation, we were like 4 iOS engineers, I believe, in the company. We had some, you know, we had Abel as a provider, which, whatever. But then, you know, we actually are more than 30 iOS developers out of 60 something. So we're actually pretty balanced between Android and iOS. I was checking some stats this morning to bring some visibility. We merged just this year over 1,000 PRs, and we actually host in our repositories, in various repositories, more than 600,000 lines of pure Swift. And we have just 4 files, I believe, David, was that? 4 files of Objective-C code, all Swift, super nice. We even have automation scripts on Swift, which actually I love the tooling part. I'm gonna use that. And yeah, I mean, that's it for me. I'm gonna be around here. There's a lot of global people around here, so just look for us and we could chat about the company and anything you want. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. So I'd like to introduce, I don't know if any of you know this guy. This is Marek Pivovarnik. Marek is going to be taking over as one of the organizers of NSBarcelona. So give him a warm welcome. He's going to be doing a talk now.
Hello, good afternoon, evening. My name is Marek Pivovarnik, and I'm going to tell you a short story about successful error structure. So it's going to be quite short, but I hope that you can take something to your code as well from this talk. Anyway, so error success, okay. So the whole story starts with starts a few years ago, actually, when I was working on a project similar to Glovo, but it was for a car company. There was like 30 plus developers, a lot of modules, a lot of code, and everything was very well organized, and there was like nothing wrong. Not. Everything was crazy connected. Nothing was working very much, and especially error handling. Error handling was basically non-existent. And everyone was doing their own error models using either classes, structs, enum, whatever came as a handy model for error. And so the management decided that we are going to do refactoring on the error handling. And so our team was asked to create or propose new error handling structure or like new error model, which would be unifying for the whole app. So we decided to plan ahead and do something amazing First of all, before actually like going deeply to the structure, like what we were asked was actually to propose something meta. So it was more like a structure, like some kind of recommendations for the programmers and other teams on how they should structure their error, rather than creating something tangible and like physical objects or structs. I will show you a concrete example, but like this is more like principles. And so first thing we did, we actually obviously looked on the existing solutions. And so we checked which kind of errors are there and what we can take into our error structure. And so from all of the errors in the market, I was quite surprised. It was a few years ago, so maybe right now it's a little bit different, but the structures which were like comprehensive enough, capturing enough errors, like being well documented and easy to read, was actually URLError and Alma Fire's AF error. Is anyone here who actually saw either of these error in depth, like worked with the properties or with the associated values? 1, 2, great. So there might be a lot of new things for you. A part of those, there's obviously some other ones, but nothing felt really good. So we stick to these two, and I'm going to go a little bit deeper what we liked about them and what we didn't like about them and what we came up with. So I will start with URLError. So this is obviously Apple's structure, and that's the thing. It's a struct, which is okay. It's great. Then struct is carrying all the error information as a properties. So all the extra information about what happened and what went wrong is stored as a property. And then this struct is containing a lot of nested, not a lot, one nested struct and several enums representing reasons of failure. And here we were a little bit like thinking, why is this happening? There is a little bit of inconsistency on finding the reason why actually the error happened. So this was like first bummer on the URLError, and therefore we moved to AF error. So in AF error, Alma Fire's error, this looked very promising at the very beginning. It was an enum. It was containing nested enums representing associated reasons of failure. So like each groups of errors were like nested together under one enum. And then all the information, what went wrong was stored as associated value of the enum. So it looked like this. I don't know if you can see it properly, but there is like a base enum of AF error, and then there is like nested enum of multi-part encoding failure reason, which has several cases, and each of the cases are carrying some associated values. And then we continued with the investigation, and we found another amazing thing, which is so-called underlying error. And it was amazing because this underlying error was basically encapsulating whatever happened before. And so with this error, we could actually trace back what went wrong. So in our project, when we were working with several modules and these modules were calling each other, then these errors were converted, then we can still nest our error in the underlying error and during debugging, find out what actually went wrong. So this was something amazing. The problem was that this underlying error was defined for each nested enum separately, which was kind of bummer because like, for example, you have like 12 or 15 enums representing different cases of failure. And yet for each of them, you need to define underlying error computed properly, which already started to be a little bit like, not sure if you want to do this. And then there was also other computed properties, and some of them were at some of the enums, some of them not. And it started to be, again, very inconsistent. We couldn't rely that one value will be there and another one won't be there. And so all of this was kind of a mess again. So what did we do? So we have this AF error and URLError. One is enum, one is struct. What shall we do? Which one is the one? Which one is the one? So here is a quiz time. Rather asking about which is your preference? Who is preferably using enums before structs when designing anything? Oh, actually, many people. And so, yeah, is it correct that the rest is using struct? So who is using structs preferably instead of enums? It's kind of equal. Oh, interesting, interesting. So what we actually do, we decided to take something from both of them and define our own structure. And so here we go. So how does the structure looks like? So we start with a struct, which is called a domain error, because we want to basically convert any kind of third-party error coming to our domain to domain error. So you can call it whatever you want, but for this example, it's domain error, obviously conforming to error protocol. It's a struct for a reason, and I will explain it in a second, because we started with enum actually. And here is first enum, which is nested enum. We called it error cause, which should actually represent what caused the error. So it's something like a reason in the AF error, and also something similar as a code in URL error. So we had enum representing like what caused it as different cases, and then we stored the value of the type in the property called cause. And so here you can start to see why we actually choose struct instead of enum, but there is one more reason, which is underlying error. And so we wanted to actually store underlying error as well together with the other properties in order to know what's going on before. We started with enum, and so basically with every single case we had associated property which was also underlying error, and that felt wrong. So we were like basically almost every single case had underlying error, and so we just decided to take it out, make it as a property on the struct, and it works until now. Next, we created public initializer, where we are trying to enforce programmers to always define error cause. So whenever there is a new error cause, you should come to the error cause enum and just define it. And it can be anything. It can be purchase failed. It can be writing data to the data store failed, network error, no internet connection, whatever. But always there should be some cause. And then also, if possible, to add underlying errors to be able to trace back what went wrong. And then we pimped it up a little bit. So we did add a debug description, which is not localized description. In this debug description, you can do any fancy stuff you want. So for example, you can describe what was the cause. You can also show the localized error of underlying error. If the underlying error is also domain error, maybe you can also debug description. And if there is like some other properties, you can keep adding them. And you can have actually very rich log out of the error once you have debug description done well. And you can go even further. And that's something which we added after a few years, after a year, which is called context description. And this is part of the initializer. So the context description was supposed to give more insight when the error happened. For example, when you are writing the data and the error cause is the writing data failed, you might want to know what the data you were writing in order to know what was going on. And so usually when you were creating error, you also added like a little bit of context message saying, this is created at the moment when we're trying to save certain type of data or anything else. And this came up really handy in a way that suddenly when you see in the log some errors, you can just literally copy paste and search for the text, because usually it's very unique somewhere in the code. So this was like a weird shortcut we discovered a little bit later. So definitely recommend it. One thing which is missing here is actually a localized description. And we didn't add it here because we believe that this is belonging to the presentation layer in a certain way, that like whatever we want to describe, we already have here, and whatever we want to show user, it should be dealt with on the presentation layer. And so here we go. We have our error structure, and I see that we are using same stack as images as Duncan. And so one more example from actually that project, it was like network error, because we have like a networking module, and there is like just very brief example of how it could be used. So there can be like unexpected response, client error, blah, 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 some other causes. And then a part of the error cause and underlying error, we are also including optionally request data, URL request data and status code if it appeared, which is very probably in network error should be. So that's the network error, and that's all from my side. Before any questions on me, or maybe first questions about the error structure, I would like to ask you what kind of errors or how you are structuring or modeling your errors. So here we go, Q&As, right? Structs as well. Is there anyone using enums for errors? In Courier app, you're using enums. Also, I saw somewhere Marco is using enums as well. Nice. Is there anyone using still classes for the errors? That's nice. Okay. One last thing which I forgot to tell you is that this structure actually works in other languages as well, obviously. So we are using very similar structure in React Native using TypeScript. So like it's widely applicable, and that's why it's called successful error structure, because it's proven by the time that it works. Anyway, that's it. Thank you very much.
Great choice of stock imagery, Marek. Great. And now we've got Ronan for our last talk of the night. Ronan's, how many talks have you done? Like 100. Like he's not the oldest in the room. He's like he's done the most talks. Is that right? How you say it?
Can you get in there? No. You're not very good in passing the mic, are you? All right. Here we go. I just need to get set up first. So a lot of newcomers here today, right? Tighten it up there. So when did NSBarcelona start? The thing is, nobody knows. No, we were actually discussing this earlier on, with Jordi, and he doesn't know either. So. Come on. All right. So I understand that quite a few of you here are iOS developers. Yeah. How many of you have worked on a large project? Show of hands. Jesus, that's a lot. How many of you have lost a bit of your life in doing code merges with Xcode projects? Is that a bane in your life? Would you like to get rid of that bane in your life? Would it make you happier? Toast does this and more. Much more. So I'm going to give you an outline of what Toast can do for you today. And there's a bit of cash to it. So who am I? My name is Ronan. I'm a lead engineer at eDreams. There's a few eDreams guys over there. But I'm also have a new hobby. I like to write, and I like to write particularly about Toast. So if you look up my name on medium.com, you'll find a few articles there. And I plan to continue. So, don't worry. There's lots more to discover. So why Toast? Well, I mentioned one thing. It makes it easier to deal with large projects. And making it easier, I'll get into that. So it solves what I just said, the whole Xcode project merge. It's an absolute nightmare. But what it also does is it forces you to put your code in the right place. It's a bit opinionated on where you put your source files. And that's a good thing, because a lot of projects are really messy. And so somebody telling you to tidy your room and making you do it is actually a good thing. So some side effects of when you're using this is that you actually have to be consistent. You have to put all the files in the right place, your resources and so on. And it makes it easier to understand. And then also, it makes it actually easier and quicker to develop and to test. And how it does that, I'll explain in a minute. So let's have just a quick couple of commands, because there's more. It's not really a huge list, but still, there's a few things you need to know. So the basic thing is init. You make a directory of the name of the project you want, and it'll pick that up, and you just go toist init, and it will pick it up. And it creates this automatic structure for you. So it gives you a few targets, like your main target. I just took eDreams here. But it gives you the same name of the project, kit and UI. Then of interest also is a source file, the project templates. So that is the code that you need to do to update, to generate your Xcode project as you extend it and add more modules to it. So quick look at what that looks like. There's the main project, the app, and you see that you've got two immediate dependencies, your eDreams kit and UI kit. Have a look at the actual generation of that, and that's, well, you add your targets together, you make your app targets, and then you make your project. Simple. So the generate command, toist generate, generates the project, obviously. But it can also be toist generate the name of the feature, or toist generate the name of the feature and tests, and so on. You don't commit this project. You never add this to your repo. You generate it on the fly every time. So you generate the project only of what you're actually interested in. And then you have a lightweight project every time. Test. So you want to test your project. It does this smartly because it knows the structure of your project. It knows how to navigate all the different targets. If you have a lot of different modules and each of them having testing targets, you can just go toist test. It will run, it will compile the project. It will run all the tests on every testing target, and it's done. It makes it really easy. It doesn't mean that you have, like if you use this on a CI system, 2 commands, 2 words, toist test, you're done. So there's a simple way of viewing your project, and that's toist graph. And you can add parameters to that, to the different targets that you're interested in, to show the relationships between the different modules. So toist graph, without any parameters, shows you your target. Now, of course, if you have lots of modules, that can be kind of huge. But as you see that, it gives you your testing target, your UI tests, your kit target, and so on. So what if you want to add a new module? So toist scaffold, and then you can provide a name of a template. So what I've done here is, well, I've got 2 types of modules. I have a domain module, and then I have maybe a core module. So a domain module, I'll have like a UI testing target, and core module, not. There might be some other differences as well, but just the command toist scaffold domain module name login generates the structure that I need for a UI module with some sample code, and you can just run and start working on that. So forces, well, it's not that it forces you, it provides you all the folder hierarchy structure, and it's really simple to do. So the example I just said, look, we do toist generate login tests. It will generate a project with those two targets, and that's it. So you're always just working in, let's say, your focused area in your own microcosm, isolated from all the noise around you. And you can just focus and do the one thing that you need to do. So now we talk about caching. So one of the nice things about cache warming is that, well, it knows your project. It will look at your dependencies. So you can have your Swift package manager or Carthage. Don't mention CocoaPods. And when you run this command, toist cache warm, it will compile all your targets and store them in a cache. Where's the cache? Well, it's tilde.toist hidden folder cache. And so it keeps in your test cache, your build cache, and so on. There's more there. So when your project is up to date, compiled, toist, you've run your toist cache, the next time you run toist generate your target, a little magic happens. The default case is that it swaps all of your source code modules with the compiled versions. So instantly, when you run a build on your project, all you're doing is running you're only compiling the bit of source code in your current module, and all the rest is already done. So it's super fast. How fast? Maybe 90% faster, maybe more. Seriously, it's true. I've tested it. So now, what about XC frameworks? So if you actually just go toist cache warm minus X, or you can just be long form XC frameworks, it will cache XC frameworks. It will compile them in multi-architecture. Then when you do toist generate minus X, it will open up or create the Xcode project, and it replaces all of your modules with their compiled XC framework versions. That's cool. It's really cool. What's even cooler is this, toist cloud. So on one hand, you're creating your modules locally, but you can also stick it up on Amazon S3. And so when you compile your code locally and cache it, you can then upload to Amazon. When you run your CI system, it can then download that from S3. Your CI runs faster, or you do some changes, you commit, stick it to your CI. It creates those new modules, uploads it to S3. You do a new checkout, new developer to the team, download the code, and it does a build run before. When you do a toist cache warm, bam, all of your compiled modules are all there. So your build time is next to nothing. Take a huge project and just reduce it to all compiled code. If you have a good approach to modular architecture, then you're not going to be compiling much code at all in your main target. So that is really quite amazing. Any questions? Yep, Marin.
Yes, I want to ask. So,
Correct.
is that like a Mac? So, real quick. So when Ron said that the CI grabs the precompiled cached frameworks from the cache, is that like a Mac CI that does that, or could this also work with like some kind of like a Linux in there and so forth?
Well, so you're talking about running an Xcode project, and you have to run on a Mac, right? So, yeah.
No Linux?
No.
No Windows?
No.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
So do you know if the tool is smart enough, for example, when you are running the twist test to detect which are the modules that have actually changes and only run tests for those specific modules, or every time you are testing, it's just building what is not cached, but it's still running the whole test suite?
So the twist cache generates hashes for all of the modules. And when it does a twist test, it checks those hashes and it compares. So if you just did a change in one module in a PR, you commit it, and then you run your CI, it's only running tests on that one module. That's it.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Yep.
So I'm actually curious about the cleanup policy of the cache. How, I mean, because this can vary a lot, right? You can have modules at different states in different PRs. So I want to know what would be the policy there by default.
So the cloud at the moment is just a new feature. So that's a good question. And it's all very green at the moment. So yeah, it could generate to be kind of huge. All right, because there's no way of eliminating older hashes and so on. Yeah. No, it's not there's the two is clean, just like delete it and so on. But yeah. Any more? Yep.
Thanks a lot. Do you think we can mix this this tool with project that we have right now, for example, with a lot of code and Cocoa Pods?
So the thing about Cocoa Pods is that, well, so Cocoa Pods have their own graph, and Twist has its own graph, and they're not friends. So, but the thing is that you actually can do a project generate, and then you can tie it together with another step, which is pod install, and it works. So that's a simple workaround, if you must. Any more questions? Oh, another one. All right.
So basically, here at Glovo, what we have is we have a strong opinion on what a module looks like and how.
So do I.
and how does it relate to other modules and who can depend on who. And we are very heavily on CocoaPods, and we have built our own tooling in order to enforce these things. So if you are trying to install, to create a dependency between two modules that should not depend on each other, we are going to forbid it. So how easy it's to extend Twist to enable us to do these rules? If it has a plugin system or something that we can do to enforce that developers don't create dependencies that shouldn't be there.
So dependencies are managed purely in the project.swift file. So if you're able to parse that project file, let's say in a script using Swift syntax, for example, provided by Apple, you can parse through that and you can go and enforce those rules. So you could do a tool, stick it, link it in with danger, and do exactly that. In theory. Yeah, it would be outside it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Alfredo is the expert here, actually.
I just want to add. So
Alfredo is working on the core team of Twist.
Yes, thanks. Yes. So if anyone wants to contribute, I mean, we are happy to welcome new contributors. So please check the GitHub /Twist. if you find any issue or if you have any issue on trying the tool. So yeah, also the CocoaPod. I mean, there is some ongoing conversation, but for now it's a bit on hold. Just going back to the question of before. No, so what Ronan says is true. Like you can do post. Obviously, you can do post generation, right? At the end, you have also the Xcode project, and you can parse it, and you can do whatever you want. But since it's the project Swift is in Swift, you can build your own feature. So the slide that Ronan showed about, I think it was project.app, so on, you can build your own methods. So you can use, I don't know, you can even use enum or struct to specify your own modules, and therefore you can enforce that even at the compilation time. So you don't need to wait for finding out later in the project. Just.
Thank you, Alfredo. Always the best source. So now, any further questions? No? Okay, so I want to leave you with one final thought. It's not one last thing. I'm not doing that one. It's one final thought. So, Toist, for me and for many of us that we worked on it, it saves you time, so you can actually focus on more important things, not just the Xcode merges nightmare. So it made me thought that, you know, what would you do if it saves you time? Barcelona is very sunny, isn't it? So maybe you could enjoy more sunshine. And if you don't have to work late, so you won't have to moonlight, you'd have faster build times. You'd have better debugging. You see what I'm getting at? Well, let's see.
Enjoy more sunshine, won't have to moonlight. Faster build times, better debugging. Enjoy more sunshine, won't have to moonlight. Faster build times, better debugging. Enjoy more sunshine, won't have to moonlight. Faster build times, better debugging. Enjoy more sunshine, won't have to moonlight. Faster build times, better debugging. Enjoy more sunshine, won't have to moonlight. Faster build times, better debugging. Sunshine, moonlight, build times, debugging. Sunshine, moonlight, build times.
That was pretty amazing. Ronan, well done. That was great.
Sunshine, won't have to moonlight. Faster build times, better debugging.
Woo!
Thank you very much. Thank you for sticking through that. It was such a serious presentation compared to everybody else.
It was great. It was great. Right. 2 more minutes and we're done. We're going to give some books away. Do you want to introduce the books? And then I'll do the winning raffle tickets.
All right, so we have 2 books that are called, I mean, it's the same book, it's just 2 copies. The book is called Living by the Code. And Living by the Code is a project from a developer who I know, Enrique Lopez Mañas. What he did was just to like grab a whole bunch of Android developers and iPhone developers who have done this for a while, and then like make a